Good morning. Welcome. Thanks for attending my session this morning. My name is Susie Tijerina. Today I will be presenting over stopping segregation in schools. I actually began my career in a segregated school, so I am very passionate and concerned about the effects that segregated schools have on our students and on our future citizens. So segregated schools, students are losing the ability to reach their full potential. All students should have access to a quality education, and in segregated schools, they are just not receiving that. So some of you may be surprised to hear that segregation still exists in schools. I mean, it's the 2000s. Really, we have, segregated schools. But yes, we still do have segregated schools, and it may not look the same as it did 60 years ago, but we have segregated schools. And when I talk about segregated schools, I'm talking about segregated schools that have a population of blacks and Hispanics that's 90% or higher. That's a segregated school. That school is not at all diverse. And we need to have diverse schools. That's what our country is made of. So we need to see that in our schools. Today you will be hearing about some of the causes of segregation in schools, what effects it has on the students, some solutions to end it, and how we can stop the segregation gap. So some of the causes for segregation in schools is residential segregation, funding, and parent expectations. So residential segregation limits access to community resources and creates separate living environments. And just as it creates separate and unequal living environments, academic segregation creates separate and unequal teaching and learning environments. So as you have residential segregation, that feeds into our academic and segregation in our schools. Low property values generate lower taxes, and this goes back, into from our residents and from our property taxes on our homes, and that affects our funding to our schools. And as you can see, funding is our next cause for segregation in schools. And funding from property taxes, so if you have low property taxes, the schools are receiving less money, and this limits what schools can expect to get because of our residential segregation. Also, parent expectations contribute to segregation in schools, as at high-achieving high schools or high-achieving schools, parents hold children to high expectations. They expect, its children to have good GPAs, maintain their grades, participate in the AP classes, participate in extracurricular activities, to be applying to colleges, not just any college, but good quality educational colleges. So parent expectations play a role in segregation also. So there are many effects that our schools and students see because of segregation. There are limited resources in the community preventing support and involvement in the schools. The community can't help the schools when they can't even help themselves. So we see less involvement because communities, worried about its own time, its own monies, and investing in themselves, that they're not able to help into the schools like they want to. Lower performing schools lose funding, and as I mentioned before, some of the causes are that the higher achieving schools get the most funding, they get the most money, so they are able to have access to the better technology, to the better qualified and experienced teachers. They have more resources, they have that they can do hands-on things with and help their students learn more. These limited resources also run into our staffing at the schools. The staff tends to be less experienced and qualified, and I can actually tell you about an example, and that example is me myself. Before I got into education, I was an accountant, and then I stayed home with my children for a few years, and after that is when I decided to go into education, and I applied at this school, and I wasn't even certified yet, and they still, set me up with an interview. He got me in, he hired me in. I'm not saying I'm a bad educator, I've learned a lot over the last few years, and a lot of experience and stuff, but I was not even certified to teach, and this principal hired me on, and I had the intent, of becoming certified, but he still hired me on, and he put me in this classroom, these students, and I'd never set foot in a classroom before, but that just goes to show, that they need teachers in these kinds of schools, and not that they're desperate, but they know they're not going to get a highly experienced teacher going into the school that has limited resources. Some other effects that we can see is that the expectations from parents are going to be different. So in a high academic score, the expectations are going to be held high by parents. They're expecting good GPAs. They're expecting, for their students to go to these prestigious colleges. And in a segregated school, the expectations from parents seem to be a little bit lower. And so you have different expectations, your results are going to be different. So in a segregated school, expectations from parents might just be for their kids to graduate, and that might be their big achievement. And so if a student is just graduating, the results are just different from what you see at a higher performing school. And with that, these students are inadequately prepared to participate in professional life. So it's like the cycle just continues on in a circle. So what are some of the solutions to our segregation in schools? We really need to make our parents and our community aware of what's going on and how our students are being affected, that we are losing out on resources in these segregated schools, and we really need our students to perform a little bit higher to get more funding, or we need to change the way our funding, the allocations of our fundings are being given to these schools. Maybe the funding needs to go, to the lower performing schools and see how they react with that, and if they have any progress in their academics with the students. Also, educators need to be aware of what's going on and be able to spread that awareness back to the parents and back to the community. So the students that are most impacted by segregated schools are Black and Hispanic students. As I mentioned before, segregated schools usually consist of about 90% of Black and Hispanic students. And when you have this many segregated schools with such a high number, these students are losing out on resources and the ability to reach their full potential. And that's really just not fair to them, because all of our students deserve good quality education. Also, as America becomes more diverse, this should be reflected in our schools. We should be able to have good, diverse schools, because as our students are going out into the real world, they're not going to be living in a segregated community. They're going to be going into diverse communities, working in diverse work environments. We need to prepare them for that. Also, teachers, years ago, they used to just go to school and they used to teach their students reading, writing, math. That's what they did. That was their job, just teaching. Today, teachers no longer are just teaching math and reading and, basic social studies and stuff. They're actually preparing our students to become effective citizens who can go out and function and be productive in our American society. So we need to make sure that we have good quality educators who can do that. Well, thank you for attending my session today. I hope this information was beneficial to you. I have included my email address here if you have any questions or you'd like any more info, or if you'd like to reach out and partner up and put a plan into action, please email me here. I would love to hear from you. Enjoy the rest of your conference.